we're going to walk through an introduction to Rhino during this video. This will give you the basics to sort of do basic modeling, drawing curves, doing some extrusions, doing some curve editing, and then and we'll add additional sort of skills as we move forward. So this first bit will just introduce you to sort of the workspace and how it's organized. And so let's begin by just taking a look at the interface here. So here we've got sort of your standard pull down menus. You can find a lot of detail sort of actions here. We won't get into a lot of those right now, but we'll add them as we go. Here we have a series of tabs, and you can see the tabs show different sort of tools for each of the different sort of categories. And there's a point at which, when we get to this set of tools here, that all of a sudden this palette over here changes in response to which tools you're selecting. So you have a series of tools up here. You also have tools you can select from here. We'll stick with standard because we're going to keep things pretty basic through this run right now. Next thing we want to look at is, so these are tools. If you hover over them, it'll give you an indication of what it is. So this is polyline. If I click and hold, I have a whole bunch of line options that I can choose from. Each of these is basically a different command that you work through. There's also the option of typing in commands here. This is actually something you're going to end up finding yourself doing quite a bit, simply because it's quicker than searching around for tools themselves. And especially if you know which tools you're using, there's a number that you're going to use quite frequently, so you'll sort of type in those commands in the command window. In terms of the actual interface here, we should probably talk about this. These are all snaps down here. You can turn them on and off as you need be, but basically this, as you draw, you will sort of snap to specific points. The standard interface is 4 different windows. There's a top view, front view, right view, and perspective view. If I just quickly draw a rectangle in the top view, you can see in the top view it's a flat rectangle. In the perspective view, you can see it's flattened out on what's called the C-plane. In the front and right view are going to look more or less the same because it's basically just a two-dimensional line. If I select it, I can see the two pieces here. Okay, so if you want to focus in on one view, like you're doing detailed work and you don't need to have all 4 views, just double click on it. To pan, you right click and hold down, and that allows you to move it back and forth, pan around. To zoom in and out, you use the scroll wheel, and you use the left button mouse to select. When you want to go back to the four view window, you just double click on that again. So, and depending on which window you're in, click into the window, then you'll zoom in and out, and it will be basically any drawing, zooming, panning will happen inside of the window. You can see you do not pan in this window. When you right click, you actually orbit around. So this is how you kind of change your position or your view when you're looking in this space. If for some reason you lose track of your object, you can recenter everything just by clicking on this button right here. Make sure you're in the window you want to recenter, and then click, and you can see it recenters it inside of this. Okay, so let's talk about the C-plane, which is this here. If we go to File, Settings, we can see in the settings we've got the grid property, and right now it's set to millimeters. So first thing I want to do is set this to inches. If you're comfortable in millimeters, feel free to stay there. I'm going to go to units and change this to inches. Yes. Everything else is good. Then I will go to grid, and I can see I have minor grid lines every 1 inch. So that's not very useful. An inch is quite large. So what I want to do is say, instead of, I want minor grid lines every 0.125 inches. So every eighth of an inch. And now I've got major grid lines every 10 minor grid lines. So instead of every 10, I want every 8, because this is an eighth of an inch. So 8/8 equals 1. So major grid lines will be every 1 inch, and minor grid lines will be every eighth of an inch. Again, if you're working in millimeters and centimeters, minor grid lines every 1 millimeter, and major grid lines every 10 millimeters or 1 centimeter. So once you're happy with that, click OK. Okay, so now we've got a grid that's working for us. And if we pan and zoom in here, we can see we've got a rectangle that we drew that is about 1 inch wide. Okay, so we'll just hit delete to get rid of this. Okay. So let's talk. So C-plane. So each of these has a C-plane which is native to its view. So the C-plane, we're looking down at the C-plane in the top view. And basically the C-plane is the default drawing surface. So if I want to draw from the top view, say a rectangle, I just click and drag in the top view, and you can see it attaches it to that plane. If I want to draw a rectangle on the front C-plane, when I click and drag, you can see now we have the front view. And if I draw a rectangle on the right-hand side view, click and drag, you can see. So now we've got basically 3 rectangles on the 3 different axes of the space. Okay? So, which gives you a fair amount of sort of flexibility in terms of, at least when you're starting, ultimately you'll want to manipulate or remove the C-planes, move the C-planes in order to draw in different spaces or at different angles, but for a starting point, this is totally fine. Okay, so that's the introduction to this. I'll start getting into drawing next.